Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Michael Young. He's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Photon Commerce. Photon Commerce accelerates customer acquisition for fintech leaders by automating invoicing and payments using AI. He's partnered with First Data, Stripe, Microsoft, and Nvidia, and has processed over $11 billion in purchases. After dropping out of a Stanford PhD, he led advanced R&D programs funded by the Department of Defense, created hundreds of jobs, raised 50 million across his venture-backed startups, and took them to acquisitions. Thanks for joining us on the show, Michael.
Thank you, David.
So I noticed that you mentioned the fact that you are a Stanford dropout. What's the story behind that one?
Yeah, I got into my dream grad school at Stanford and was very conflicted because also was working on a startup idea. So I was like, why not try both? So go to Stanford, see how things go, and you can always drop out if needed. Talk to my advisor at Stanford, and he was like, you should drop out because that's exactly what I did when I was your age. So that was a no-brainer. It was not even a difficult choice. And as an entrepreneur, you really have to have this calling. You know, if you're conflicted about it, then it's already kind of game over. It needs to be, your like religion, like your actual calling and your purpose to, do your own thing. So did that, dropped out, then got some patents granted for our invention there, raised about $20 million in venture capital funding and also Department of Defense funding.
Could you elaborate on what this idea was that you decided to drop out for?
Yeah, it's a novel nanotechnology. So it's creating a flexible and transparent touchscreen material for making like a cell phone or an iPad. Flexible and bendable and lightweight. We reduce the costs of the touchscreen layer by over 90%. And you can also print these electronics. So before that, I worked at IBM doing what's called photolithography, which is you need a whole huge billion-dollar factory just to make circuits. We could make the sort of equivalent by just printing something with the same printer as what you would print a T-shirt with. So screen printer. So we invented that and then got, for instance, the chairman of Dow Chemical Ventures to join us as chairman. And then after several years and a lot of hard work, we had an acquisition by the largest maker of touchscreens in the world that actually invented the touchscreen technology that goes into the iPhone. Steve Jobs found this technology and with this company and went to market with it, invented the iPhone with it.
So I imagine you are not regretting that PhD anymore. Or do you?
No, I don't think so. But
Okay.
yeah. And then after that, started another company with a Stanford Professor. We grew that company to over 100 employees in just like 2 years' time, with support and backing from like Google AI and some other industry leaders too. So
How'd you build that relationship with a Stanford professor?
I was referred to him by a mutual friend who's also a senior administration member at Stanford. And
So like just through I guess email or like a phone introduction, you talked about like, hey, this is me, this is what I want to do. Will you join me? Or like how that conversation happen?
Yeah, they called me up and it was like, you guys need to talk. And then, I was like driving and I just got this call. And this professor, he was in his research group coming up with an idea to start a company. And so teamed up with him, paired with him to bring some of my, entrepreneurial experience with, his research experience. And then, rapidly grew the company very, very fast. We then distributed products to over about 500,000, customers and patients in just like 2 or 3 years' time.
And what was this research on?
We invented a new way to provide low-cost glasses and eyewear, as well as medical technology to networks of hospitals. So we built partnerships with over 30 or so hospitals. And how do you AI to automate the eye exam?
And how do you go about making partnerships with hospitals? I imagine that's not something you did prior, unless you didn't list it on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, it involves a lot of hard work and also research collaborations. So knowing a lot of professors and principal investigators, as well as industry leaders. So, attending a lot of conferences and having also connections to doctors, nurses, optometrists, ophthalmologists, as well as like medical associations too.
So I think there's a huge benefit in the academia community because they're always pushing the edge of what exists and what could exist. And I imagine there's a huge layer of lag between when something is novel and ready in a research form to when it's ready in like a production capable at scale ready solution. So how do you know as an entrepreneur when is the right time to take an idea that exists in academia and to translate it into production versus it's not yet the right time or the timing is missing some key components of some sort?
It's a hard question, but also you can boil it down to a pretty easy question. If you have a customer, then you're golden. You need a paying customer, right? So you bring your technology. It could be a prototype, right? It could be a proof of concept. Just something that's demoable, right, to prospective customers. And you'll be able to very well know if this is hitting on something that's really important. You'll be able to really just understand from their body language and their sort of like emotions if this is really, really exciting and game-changing for them or not. Right? Is this a sort of nice to have versus like a hair on fire problem?
So when you had this technology that you're working with this professor on, did you have that customer in mind? And did you know how long it would take to productionize it? Like what if they are ready to buy, but it'll take you 3 years to build? Like is that like a trade-off you had to make, or do you know it would be pretty quick to implement?
Well, that one was more of a sort of consumer, right, product play, direct to consumers and patients. So there, it involves a lot of partnerships with industry leaders. So we partnered with the world's largest makers of glasses and eyewear, and achieved widespread distribution across the U.S. and China already. So, with my previous experience doing also distribution, supply chain, and then the nanotechnology, work across the U.S. and China, there was a lot of, interesting synergies there. But also, this professor has been doing research in this space for a long time, many, many years, and spent, most of his career looking into this problem. And so he's one of the, world experts at this problem.
Gotcha.
And has significant partnerships with many other universities and research institutions around the world.
So how long does it take you as an entrepreneur to vet an idea? For example, your professor friend has this idea, he has the research, and he thinks that it's like marketable. There is a customer in mind. How do you know how long it would take to make it a reality?
That's a good question. So, how long would it take? I think for us, it was quite immediate because we already had significant data and research traction. So converting it from a wide scale research project into a product, that was actually very, very fast.
Like days, weeks, months, years?
A few months.
Okay.
But in terms of, you're always iterating, right? The product development never ends. So you always have like an MVP and a version 1, version 2. And we grow in a very agile fashion.
So I noticed that you have done a lot of these entrepreneurial journeys. Is there a reason you decide you want to, when you were first considering the PhD, to pursue a PhD in something technical versus, say, the realm of business?
Yeah, I'm a very technical person. So I was coding since like age 11. Built my first like laser from scratch when I was 18 years old. And then, became a principal investigator when I was like 22 years old with millions of dollars worth of R&D funding. I built 3 labs, from scratch. So yeah, I love technology, and I believe that technology is what defines, the human civilization, really. So I believe that also technology can democratize the sort of human experience, give people, an equal playing field as much as possible, and empower people to live, lives more fully.
Were you ever concerned that in pursuing a PhD, you'd go pretty deep down the realm of the technical and be potentially too oblivious as to the practical?
There is a concern there. Now, it obviously depends on the type of PhD and the type of research or principal investigator. But yes, in general, yeah, getting a PhD can be pretty lonely because very few people in the world may sort of understand what you're doing. And so that was, perhaps also a sort of secondary or tertiary sort of reason. But I do love research a lot as well.
So people also call the entrepreneurial path a lonely path. Do you feel more lonely as an entrepreneur or as a PhD student?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand there's definitely lonely parts in both. I would say as an entrepreneur, that's not as lonely as probably certain types of PhDs because as an entrepreneur, you're talking to 10, 15 people a day. And so, being an entrepreneur is still, you need a very, very close, human connection to your team, to your customers, to your investors, to everyone.
Was entrepreneurship a natural extension of your love for technology, or was it something that you had to adopt later on as you learn more about, I guess, the world?
I think it was definitely a natural extension. So, when you're first starting off as an engineer or technologist, you then very, very quickly realize that your engineering is bottlenecked by the amount of funding that you have.
Yes.
Right. And so then you realize that, your professors, right, they're just spending 80-90% of the time fundraising, right,
Yes.
and writing grants. And if you want to do your own research, right, you're either helping your PI write grant proposals, right, or as an entrepreneur, right, you're fundraising. So the business and obviously the customer needs are completely intertwined with the actual technology, and that's exactly how it should be too.
What would you say are some of your strengths that really helped you combine the technical and the entrepreneurial domains together and to make, I guess, these theoretical concepts in the realm of academia a reality?
It's a very deep question. I think really key is being able to fully understand who your customer is. Who are you really, working for? Who is your technology really addressing? Right. The classic thing that any product manager or engineer wants to avoid is building something that no one cares about.
Yes.
You need to first find the person that cares about, the thing that you may be interested in building. Fully understand their problem and their needs and work backwards from that. You never do it the other way around. Otherwise, you're just building a product. It's like building a bridge to nowhere.
One of the things I think about from, I guess, and maybe correct me if this was not the case from your PhD experience, but I had a lot of friends who are also doing PhDs in technical domains, and they felt like they're doing a lot of research on things that were research for the sake of research versus research for the sake of user benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. In academia, you really optimize for something that's sort of intellectually stimulating or interesting, right? That's elegant theory. But in the real world, data is very dirty and there's a lot of exceptions and, also just hard-coded, rules in places. So, it's absolutely critical to talk to end, users, other industry professionals, understand practical problems, and be able to also go back and forth between theory and practice.
Is there any piece of advice that you give to someone who is currently in a master's or PhD program but knows eventually they want to get into entrepreneurship?
PhD programs are extremely long.
Yes.
Masters, many people finish a master's in 1 year. And that's great. A lot of people I know who got a PhD their topic becomes obsolete halfway through their program, not even at the end of their program, halfway through. And then they switch careers after their PhD. So I think industry changes faster than 5 or 7 years, right? The average length of a PhD. It's extremely difficult. I would say it's impossible to predict what the industry or the world, will be in 5 to 7 years. So, my advice there would be to really understand what you're trying to optimize for. Now, obviously, I have the highest respect for professors and academics. And if you want to, stay in academia, right, and teach, that's totally fine. You should get a PhD, right? But if you want to get a PhD to go into industry for certain technical fields, then I would advise to think very, very hard and deeply about if that really makes sense. Many times, you learn a lot more in industry than in academia, right? So if you stay in academia, you might have a tiny little budget for data or for resources, right? Or you could go get a job at Google and have billions of dollars of resources at your disposal.
And you probably get paid a little more, at least a little more.
Probably, yeah. Now, there are fantastic things, too. I've heard a lot of these tech companies, they even provide nice fellowships, right, and internships. So you can have both, certainly.
So across these, you mentioned earlier that you want to start with a customer in mind, someone who's passionate about a problem, that it's kind of like a hair on fire situation, who's willing to pay for a solution. Is there a certain type of user that or a certain cohort of, or like a subset of the population that you're like passionate about serving? Like you mentioned a couple examples of like medical and I guess optical. Like, is that the space that you are most passionate about, or like what did you evolve as you went through different companies?
So I'm currently doing a fintech company, and because payments is one of the most universal problems for businesses, especially, and also payments in the B2B space is actually bottlenecked by documents. So half of B2B payments are still cut over a check, paper check. And half of invoices are still paper or a PDF, in this country. So the paper problem is a huge problem that bottlenecks transparency and visibility and efficiency in businesses today. So we set out with the inspiration to basically imagine this: like Elon Musk can teach cars to how to drive themselves, right? They can read and understand the road. How come, AI has come so far, but it still can't read a receipt, can't read like an invoice, right? So we set out with the vision to build the world's #1 AI company that can understand documents, right? Both with vision as well as natural language processing.
So how'd you go from more physical products and applications of research into more, I guess, digital ones? Like, what was the journey and how'd you discover that problem?
Well, I was always a computer person. I was coding since age 11, and all of my companies had significant software and automation components to them. So I've been passionate about just automating industry, broadly speaking. And so talking to thousands of companies out there, one of the most universal pain points was, payments. Like, why can't businesses have like a payment sort of UX as easy as Venmo or Cash App, right?
Can I pause you there for a second? Did you say that you talked to thousands of companies? Is that right?
Yeah, thousands. Yes.
How'd you go and have that many conversations?
One at a time. That's the short answer. So, knowing a lot of folks, and having investors that make great introductions. Sometimes just getting demos, right, from other companies. You're just curious, how their product works, right? LinkedIn, email, phone calls, cold calls.
You cold called people just to get like a meeting with them to learn more about their pain points?
That's what you got to do as an entrepreneur.
Okay. Like how'd you know who you want to call? Like, did you call every company in the like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or like what was your strategy?
No, I mean, I don't like just sit there and cold call like anyone.
Right.
But you know, you can find phone numbers, obviously trivially online, and then reach out in a respectful and sort of polite way, right? Hey, I was hoping to speak with X person about this, right? And
Mm.
obviously, um, and also have a mind for partnerships, right? Have a mentality to help other people, right? First before even yourself, and basically paying it forward. So offering to introduce people to them, right, or customers to them.
Where
And
did you
obviously,
think
there's a bunch of entrepreneurial societies and accelerators too, right?
that core quality you're just talking about, the selflessness of putting others before yourself, is pretty critical? That you, like you said, for entrepreneurship, is that a trait that you learned at an early age? Like, how did you learn to realize the importance of selflessness?
I think that's just part of being a nice person.
Okay.
I can't really think of one single point of inspiration there. I think that's just my sort of upbringing, and it just kind of makes sense, right? Like if someone helps you, right, then you kind of want to help them, right? If you respect them, then they'll respect you, right?
And I agree with that, and I would totally to love to live in that world. But sometimes I have this feeling that my rosy tinted view of the world may not be a realistic view of the world, especially when you have a lot of. I guess it depends on where you are in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well.
Yeah, but if you, as the saying goes, right, if you want people to respect you, then respect them first, right? And that usually works.
Sorry, so you were telling me how you had these thousands of conversations, understood their pain points, and then you went to realize that this was worthy of solving. Is that the
Yeah, that's
correct
right.
understanding? Okay.
Exactly. So that's
And
the whole journey of finding product market fit.
and is that you by yourself when you first hit that point, or did you have a team at that point already when you were doing that product discovery process?
I did have a small team, yes. So you first start out with like your first product, get revenue, get traction, right? Get some investments, and you can start building a team around that. And then you'll have like V2 of a new product or a completely new product that does something sort of adjacent.
So what was the V1 or V0.1 of your current company?
We created a platform to help e-commerce merchants be able to automate their reconciliation of invoices, purchase orders, inventory, packages, shipments, orders, and payments, all in one place.
And you don't feel like there was a good fit solution prior? Is that fair to say?
Correct. Yeah, nothing like this existed before.
Why do you feel like that's the case?
Because the customer told us that it
Okay.
didn't exist. So
Okay.
yeah, and obviously if you search for it, it doesn't exist. So
I always find it really interesting when entrepreneurs are able to find this edge case. Where like, dang, the solution isn't all that complex. Like, it's not going to like take 100 years to build. It's not going to take $1 billion to build. Yet it's still an unsolved problem. And I feel like that's where a lot of opportunities can be found.
exactly. Yeah.
Have you? I'm assuming you scaled your team since that MVP V0.1 time, right?
Yes, that's right. So today we have about 25 people, but actively hiring. We have about 10 positions open.
And how did you hire these? How did you meet these people to hire?
Some of them through investors, some through common friends, some through LinkedIn, some through other online avenues, some through Slack groups, some through accelerators, some through entrepreneurial societies.
So there's no one favorite location that you have?
It really depends on the type of person that you're trying to find, right? Like, say, an engineer or an entrepreneur or a business person.
So out of that 20 odd team, what's the percentage of them that are like engineers, and what about the rest?
The majority of folks are engineers. So we're a very technology first company. And recently, we've been seeing a lot of traction around the business side. So we've been aggressively also hiring on the business development and partnerships, sales front too.
And do you lead all those, or do you have a co-founder that helps lead some of that?
I am solo. In all of my previous companies, I've had a multitude of co-founders, but this time I'm solo. But I have a fantastic team, and also fantastic advisors too.
And are those advisors you've met along, I guess, using the same mechanisms of trying to meet people, like the same universal system?
Yeah, some of them are through warm introductions or other investors introducing people to us.
Okay. And are these like equity based advisors, or do you pay them in cash? How do you choose to make
Yeah,
it worth their while?
advisors are generally equity positions. Yes.
Okay. And I recognize that on your LinkedIn, you also mentioned that you're a fellow of the On Deck Fellowship Program. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I was in the first batch, their first founding batch,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
pre-pandemic era.
How many of your connections come from that community?
I have great friends that are from On Deck, so
Hmm.
yeah, a good number, and I would strongly recommend On Deck program for entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs.
What did you personally get out of the program, and what type of like entrepreneur do you think would benefit the most in terms of like stage of company?
On Deck, I believe, well, now they have many different cohorts and themes and groups. So I think everyone can find a home in one of those. Even non-entrepreneurs, there's like a first 50 sort of cohort. If you want to be an early employee or chief of staff, there's
Hmm.
like media or podcasts, theme ones too. But the one I was part of in the first one is for founders and aspiring founders or people thinking of doing their own thing but still at a nice cushy job, and networking, finding co-founders so that they can decide to take the plunge away from a nice paycheck.
Is it a structured program where they have like, okay, on this day we're going to like cover these themes, on this day we're going to do these themes, or is it like pretty free form?
There is a very good amount of structure, but it's mostly self-organized as a sort of community. So you can call your own workshop or session. Everyone is their own, thought leader around something. Yeah, it's sort of like a self-organized, community in that sense. But there
Okay.
is also, some rigid programming as well from the core team too.
Is the On Deck Fellowship meant to be a competitor to the YC model, or is it more like in parallel where you can like be a part of both and benefit from both?
Well, it's separate. That's the
Okay,
short answer. So On Deck doesn't take equity.
I see.
Yeah, it's not really an accelerator. It's more of a community. It's a virtual community.
Gotcha. Okay. I also noticed on your LinkedIn you had on your website you had a bunch of notable like logos, things we talked about before, like Brex, Stripe, Microsoft, Nvidia, and UiPath. How did you go about scoring those more visible clients? Because I think every entrepreneur would love to score the most visible clients for their business.
I think it does take a lot of time and just industry experience, knowing the right folks in the technology sector. So if you're, for instance, like a first-time entrepreneur, it really helps if you know people already, at some of these companies, or you attend some of their conferences. Sometimes you just go to one of the conferences that they host, then you bump into their CTO just at over wine or beer, right? So that's a fantastic way. I know it's kind of old school to connect with people in that way, but such is life in sort of enterprise. Now, if you have certain connections, you could try LinkedIn. There's also obviously now virtual conferences that could make it in theory a little bit easier to connect with folks there.
Do you
But
have a
obviously, a great way is some type of warm introduction.
do you have a favorite conference or set of conferences?
I don't know if I have a favorite. I just attend, some of them. I guess my favorite is CES, the Consumer Electronics Show.
Me
It's a
too.
very, very fun conference, in Vegas. And yeah, it's just a really awesome time. It is as if you traveled like 3 years into the future because you're seeing all these products that have not been launched yet. And for instance, you can sit in like a BMW, like, i8 and just drive it around the strip. Right. And then they also serve you like beef Wellington and things like that. It's a really interesting conference. So,
do you have a favorite one for your personal learning as an entrepreneur, or do you think CS fills that role?
well, I attend a bunch of conferences. I think some of them have like slightly different themes, right? Some are more tech, some are more sort of specific to a certain vertical. But TechCrunch is another pretty good conference. I think CES though is probably one of the most unique ones.
Okay. Can you tell me about some of the pain points that you feel like AI has yet to solve, or is it the edge of solving right now within the fintech space?
Well, AI, we are using AI to do automatic categorization and reconciliation, as well as understanding of financial data and documents. So, we believe we are on the forefront there, and for creating a bunch of partnerships with the largest, fintech companies in the world. So there's a ton of opportunities there. One is to capture, right, the 50% of B2B payments that's still cut over a check, right? Visa and MasterCard, all these card companies have been around for like decades. But why is it that the adoption of cards in businesses is still very low, right? People are still doing electronic funds transfers and writing checks to each other. So we are seeing a huge change, though, in sort of behavior, led by some of the leaders like Brex, Divvy, Ramp, right, where they're doing a fantastic job educating the market about the advantages of using card. And there's a bunch of great other innovations too, like real-time payments. There's a lot of new policies that are coming out as well. That's going to revolutionize how digital payments and cards and mobile payments and obviously crypto and blockchain can also affect things.
It mind blows me that it's 2021 and we've just went through a year of immense transformation digitally, and there's still companies out there who'll be like, David, what's your fax number? I'm like, fax number? Who has a fax machine nowadays?
Exactly, yeah.
So in terms of the realm of AI, I think of AI as primarily one of having two major components. One is algorithms and the other one is data. So when you have, I imagine the algorithms there's two types of algorithms. There's the in-house like built one where you try to solve a very like niche use case, as well as the generic, like give me enough data and I'll like find some patterns in them. And then, but when it comes to the data, where are you getting the data to make the AI useful across a variety of different types of formats of, I don't know, financial documents? I imagine there's like a whole sort of ways they can be structured, like visually.
Absolutely. So in the very beginning, we went direct to e-commerce merchants that are in the Amazon ecosystem.
I see.
And derived a very large data set, from that to help train our e-commerce and intelligence and payments technologies. Then we started powering some of the large fintech platforms out there. Became a partner to Intuit, and obviously a partner to Microsoft and Nvidia as well, and derived a lot of data there. Obviously, we have many more partnerships as well that hopefully we can disclose sometime very soon.
I mean, that must be a huge ask to make of a company like, hey, can we get your data so that we can train on it?
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, how long is that process for a typical like Microsoft level giant?
Very long, extremely long.
2+ years?
Yeah, at least. Yeah,
okay,
or infinite. Yeah.
Okay, infinite's never the answer most engineers want to hear, but sometimes it's a reality.
Yeah.
So when you have these major players, the first one must have been incredibly difficult in terms of the friction. Were you handling that relationship personally, or do you have someone on your team help you with that?
A lot of it in the early days is founder-led, but you also bring in fantastic talents and advisors, right? Investors that can help also open doors and help accelerate things.
So when it comes to leading the company as well as leading the tech, do you have a person that you have in the team that you put in charge of all things AI, and then you handle all things business, and someone else handles all things marketing? How do you split up roles within a small team, or do you make everyone a jack of all trades? What's your philosophy on that?
I think it really depends on the specific person.
Okay.
And so my leadership style is I really customize it to every single person. Every single person I treat as unique. Everyone has a different personality and outlook and goals in their career. Some people are fantastic at marketing and biz dev, and they can code, right? And then some people are more specific types of skill sets. So I think as a leader, it's really, really important to understand the people that you work with, and create a sort of organization, almost like around each person. And that's the way that you can have the best type of culture and harmony between folks too.
So I definitely agree it's the best way to have the best culture, but are you concerned about scaling? Like, what if you want to have 200? Like, it exceeds the Dunbar number in terms of the number of meaningful relationships you can sustain.
Correct. That's why I like startups.
Okay.
In that, as the sort of Amazon saying goes, you don't want to have a meeting with more people than that can a single pizza can feed. It gets, once your company grows to beyond the size of you can fit everyone into a single room, then yes, you do run into scaling issues. But that's why I just love small and agile and elite sort of commando teams. We can just move so much faster than almost any other organization.
So when you're hiring for these people, are there certain elements that you're looking, like certain innate traits that you're looking for in these people? Because I imagine the combination of things you just listed aren't common. Like I have not met too many people who are both excellent at coding and biz dev. Like that's a rare combination.
It's extremely rare, yeah. But we go through thousands of resumes a week to just hire, one person a month. It's extremely, selective of a process. And we only, work with some of the best people, out there in the industry.
How would you encourage entrepreneurs who are struggling to hire reach the stage where they're having thousands of inbounds and have the option to handpick their favorites out of the large pool?
It's highly non-trivial. We don't have it solved.
Okay.
Hiring is one of the hardest things really out there. So I think, LinkedIn has been probably one of the best areas where you can find folks and connect with people authentically. So I would recommend that. There's a bunch of other pretty good platforms out there too.
Is that where most of your 1,000 monthly applicants are coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's most, but
Okay.
A lot of them.
So now that you, I guess, hire all these people and you want to build a culture around each individual one, how do you put them all together and make sure they work in harmony with each other? Because if each individual has a micro environment that is tailored to their specific strengths and weaknesses, how do you pair that with other people, even up to the 20 something person scale?
It's really not easy. The other thing is having a dynamic sort of work environment too, because maybe this month everything is really great, but then next month someone wants to try something new, like go into a new project, right? Ask for a new type of assignment. Then kind of work with them on really understanding what motivates them, right? If they want to switch from one project to another project, then ask why, what's sort of driving that, and then having people be able to understand sort of reassignments and making sure that everyone's still extremely happy, motivated, and productive. So there's not really a set thing. You always need to just have your ears open and be extremely empathetic and really understand what they want, not just what the company wants.
So on top of empathy and flexibility, what are some of the other major key pillars of your company's culture?
Yeah, those are the main ones. We love folks that are also just inherently extremely driven, devoted, charismatic. They're positive. They have very positive and high degree of energy. So I will say, once you have one person that's really, negative, that's toxic.
Okay.
And it's like a bad apple. It will make everyone else around them also extremely negative. So we like folks that are just very optimistic and very positive and just exude, great energy.
I imagine, as anyone would, when they make hiring decisions, that eventually they do hire someone that is a bad, poor fit, not necessarily like unethical, not necessarily a bad engineer or bad product manager, whatever, just a poor fit in general. Are you the type that prefers to be extra cautious in the hiring process, or do you have a like fire fast philosophy, or do you combine both?
We're very slow to hire, and if there's a clear no fit with someone, then as the saying goes, then you also fire fast.
Do you find that to be a struggle, or do you think you understand the pros and cons and trade-offs associated with hiring nowadays?
I think obviously if you're early on as a manager, then obviously there's a lot of interesting lessons to be learned on how to better manage and lead folks. But I've hired hundreds of people in my career, and so I think one particular strong area of my skill set is being able to identify and nurture, especially young talents. So
Young being like college grad, or young being like 30 or 40?
in general.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult to say like an actual age, but younger.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So one of the things I like to do on this podcast is just ask people for advice they would like to share other founders. Is there something specific that you feel like you've been learning recently that you wish you knew, call it 5 to 10 years ago?
I think what's really key is there's a saying where if your companies don't fail because you run out of money. Companies fail because the founders lose energy. And so you have to really look at your own energy level and be able to understand not just financial runway, but your own emotional and energetic runway. That may be shorter than your financial runway, or maybe it's longer, right? So, yeah, that's something that obviously people don't really teach like in school, and you just need to, people need to say that. But that's sort of one, word of advice, to be highly, highly cognizant of your own sort of limitations, your team's limitations, because also it's not just yourself or your founding team; it's also your own, extended team as well, and understanding the sort of softer side of what makes a business, successful.
Is there a specific soft skill that you would emphasize worth learning really, really critically in the early days?
I think communication and negotiation, it's absolutely critical. Something that I never really got formal training around, right? A lot of people, they say, negotiation, that class is like the best class ever taken. But so I think that's a critical skill, just understanding how to read people and communicate with people and resolve differences and work something out.
I think learning negotiating is a critical skill across every industry, even non-entrepreneurs. But when you think about negotiation, like what do you think? What comes to mind when you think about the term negotiation?
Well, the number one thing is you never call it negotiation.
Okay.
Right? So you're always, working something out and making it of mutual benefit to, both parties. That's the only sort of, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not win or lose.
Right.
It's how to make both, folks win as the outcome.
And how do you think you learned that? When do you think you learned that in your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, you learn it anytime you talk to someone.
Okay.
and want to do like a deal, right, with someone. But negotiations happen all the time, right? You might be talking to a coworker, you might be talking to someone you're hiring, right?
Or more specifically, how do you know it's a skill that you yourself want to get better at? When did that happen in your journey as an entrepreneur?
I think it's throughout. I can't really identify a specific sort of circumstances. I think it's just a general systematic topic.
Okay.
So just in general, especially how to diffuse tense situations.
I imagine you face a lot of those when you're hiring hundreds of people.
Well, hopefully it's not that often. But yeah.
Well, it's inevitability on the law of large numbers, and I feel like hiring hundreds of people is more than what most entrepreneurs will probably hire in the next few years. It's definitely a significant achievement.
Thanks. Yeah.
I've enjoyed this conversation, and I've gotten a lot out of it. I just want to be respectful of your time as well. So I like to end all of my calls the same way. What's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you if that's something they'd like to do?
Sure, they can reach out at just Michael at photoncommerce.com.